I know. You're constantly making choices about your food, what you eat, what you avoid, where you get it, and how you factor in all the noise about what's right. But I think you're missing something really critical about how the food on your plate is deeply connected to everything you care about: your health, the community, the environment, and the economy. I'm Dana DePrima, founder of the For Farmers movement and host of the One Bite is Everything podcast, now proudly a part of Heritage Radio Network. Here we are reconnecting the dots, revealing the hidden forces behind our food system and why it matters more than ever. Each week, we uncover the real impact of what's on your plate, who controls it, what's at stake, and what you can do about it. Because food is more than just what you eat. It's quite literally connected to everything you care about. New episodes drop every Thursday. Subscribe to One Bite is Everything and take your seat at the table.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Annie Shi. We'll talk to Annie about motherhood, work-life balance, and our new wine bar, Lay. We'll also be joined by Matt Turner, her wine director. We'll taste a wine from their upcoming list for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Annie, she is the beverage director and partner at beloved New York City restaurants King and Jupiter. I want to remind Annie, she defied her Chinese parents by leaving her Yale education and a career in finance to work in the restaurant biz. Not popular at that time. Annie balances work life as a mom and a restaurateur. She just had her second child, so to make life easier, what do? She opens her own wine bar in Chinatown called Lay. Lay features a thoughtfully curated wine list from established and up-and-coming producers from around the world, along with a tight Chinese menu. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, Annie.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking to Annie at her new wine bar, Lay.
Yes.
I keep... It goes back and forth. Lay.
Lay. Yeah.
Lay is in Chinatown, literally in the heart of Chinatown. Doyers. It's a kind of, if you know, Doyers has been here forever, but you're not going to walk by it unless you know where to go type thing. So it's a great and interesting location. Annie, before we get started, big congrats to you. Let's not forget your continued success at King and Jupiter. And we'll talk about what just happened at King, the opening of your new wine bar, which is, one of the reasons we're here. And most importantly, welcoming your second child into the world not too long ago. All right. So I told you off mic that I was just intrigued about, motherhood, this business, everything you're doing. So speaking of that second kid, let's start by talking about your life-work balance. And you kind of answered it in an email, but it needs definite, expansion. The general question is, how do you do it?
Well, like I said in my email, Sam, it takes a village. It's not possible to do it on your own. And I am very, very lucky to have a great business partner, a great partner in life. My family's relatively close by. So I would say it's having a huge support network to make it all work. And I will also say that you learn work-life balance as you go. And opening King, there was no work-life balance. The worst work-life balance in my entire life was in the 2 years after we opened
Wait,
King.
you opened King and you're implying that it was just
harder.
balls to the wall and just there was no balance. It was that.
We were working 80 to 90 hours a week for like a full year. And then the second year was not much easier. And that was the hardest bit. And then when I had my first kid, my first baby, Fitz, I think that transition was again super hard. I literally didn't check my inbox once in the first 4 months because I was so overwhelmed with motherhood and what that change looked like.
Is there a parallel where when you opened King, you know, you just went full out and then you have a kid, which they give you a manual, but it's really go as, you know.
I don't think you know how to do it.
Right. And you were just heads down on that.
And so I think now with, you know, each opening subsequently is a little bit easier. And now with the second, with HG or Hannah, having done it once before, it's a little bit easier. So I think there's definitely something about learning along the way.
So was there any balance when you had your first kid? Or, I mean, did you learn anything then that you apply now?
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of postpartum depression. And I think that was very much linked to, for me, a huge identity shift. Like when you work in restaurants and you're a restaurateur, you're like on a daily basis, I'm interacting with like maybe 100 people between guests and staff. And
so it's socialization, adults.
And running around. And when you have a
purpose,
baby,
different purpose.
Like I was not stuck, but I was afraid to leave the apartment with my newborn. And so you're sitting in like we live.
Why?
There's just an anxiety about it. I think for me, it was just.
But like somebody would bump into the stroller. I mean, what were the anxieties?
I think that's part of the postpartum depression. And I think it's the hormones. But I was so new to it that I literally had the idea that if I walked outside with the stroller, someone might like bump the stroller or might drop. Like, I don't even know. It's completely irrational. So I wasn't leaving the apartment.
It's not uncommon. It's not irrational.
Yeah.
It's common. People go through that.
But I wasn't leaving the apartment. We live in New York City. It's like a 800 square foot apartment, like going a little bit stir crazy. And when you're alone with the baby, you're just like in this 2-hour rinse and repeat cycle of breastfeeding, which was very difficult for me, nursing, changing diaper, nap. And so I think that it was such a drastic, extreme shift that was really the challenge of the first, not knowing how to handle that and like feeling like I was supposed to be sitting at home by myself doing that.
Right.
Like I felt like that was motherhood, and it turns out it's not. It's you can define those boundaries.
So 2 things. At that point, one of your partners, I think it was Claire, she had kids already.
I think so. Yeah. Yes.
Were you able to tap into her a little? Like, what am I feeling, or what's going on, or what are you doing, or not really?
Not really. I think everyone has such a. I mean, she was. I want to say she had open stitching, so like she was busy with her. She had a lot going on herself. But I think there's definitely a support network of women. But I think so much of the difficulty with that first was thinking that you had to do it yourself and not ask for help as much. So that's definitely something I've learned a bit more with the second, is to ask for help and to have friends stop by.
I mean, I guess you have to figure that out on your own, even though it seems so obvious.
And, this was, and I'm talking about like the first 2-3 weeks of life with Fitz. And then my husband started paternity leave. And then we went to Europe for a month. And then we rented a house upstate for a month, actually a dear friend, Jay Strell's house in Hudson. And then I was like, oh, this is so much easier when you get out of the house, when you leave New York City, when you have a partner.
Out. But there's kind of this funny timeline. You said at the very beginning with postpartum and like going out, you had all this anxiety. A month later, you get on a plane with the kid. to Europe?
Yeah.
So
well,
obviously you cured a lot of those woes.
I think my husband, Sean, is a big, big part of what makes all of this possible. He's a truly incredible partner.
He's the
and
counselor and cheerleader.
100%.
Right.
And he
You
said
need
to
that.
me, he was like, I remember he was like, let's go outside. We sat at like a restaurant on our corner with the baby, with Fitz. He's like, let's just go sit at a restaurant and have a drink. It's not going to kill you. And turns out that was all I needed. Sunshine and a spritz outside. And
So at the end, he looked at you and he said, "This isn't so bad." And you said, "You're right. That's good." So the second thing I want to ask is, obviously, you told me you were working 80 hours a week, opening King and all that. But obviously, there's a love for King, for the business, for clients, where you went back after Fitz and you went back after your second child. That's a good thing.
yeah, Jess and I always say
so
King's the first baby.
Right. The future says you're going to juggle motherhood and working, because there's nothing on that end that's like, I'm done with that.
No, definitely not. I think when you open your own business and it's a restaurant, you're committing to it like you commit to having a kid. Like you want it to stick around. At least Jess and I want it to stick
More
around.
than other jobs, just because it's a different animal. Are you saying that, the restaurant biz, or in general?
Yeah, I think it just depends. I mean, you could definitely have that same approach to a different kind of industry and job.
Right.
But when we set out to open King, we wanted it to be an institution. We wanted it to stick around. We wanted to stick around for as long as possible. The restaurants that we really looked up to, the River Cafe in London, Chez Panisse, Zuni Cafe, they're all these incredible places that have stuck around through the ages.
So what you knew, because you're there 10 years later, what you knew then, you said, was not much, but what you knew was to tap in to people that were doing it well. I mean, you looked not afar, but you looked, hey, Zuni does this. River.
I think that's what we wanted to create. And that's what
So you did have a vision.
Yeah, we did. We had intention for what we wanted to build, even if we didn't quite know how to build it.
Right. Well, that's part of it too. Do you agree with me that it's tougher for a woman to be in this business, hospitality, restaurant, wine service, or you can dispute that with me?
I think it definitely is when it comes to just the hours that you are I think it's tough for any parent with young kids who want to be fully involved in all aspects. So I think there's just more pulls on my hours and like my time than there was previously, and that is like a permanent change in my approach. I'm very lucky again to have Sean with this opening. He has committed to solo bedtime for the next foreseeable future, and that allows me more flexibility to be here, because otherwise, the kids go down every night at 6:30, and we live
Are they
not
sleeping
close.
through the night?
They are sleeping through the night, which we are, knocking on wood, we're very, very lucky. We've actually moved both into the same nursery / bedroom, and we did
So
that.
they're in sync enough where
Yeah.
you're not fighting one up, one sleeping. and then-
Yeah. We did that ahead of the opening, but they are sleeping together in the same room, which is really, really nice.
Right. Do you remember as a kid, you wouldn't know then, but was there a work-life balance with your parents, or it didn't exist? Did they come over from China?
They did.
They're immigrants. They're
Yeah.
not even. So they came here, started working. I mean, it's different then than now, but was there any did you look as a kid like my parents aren't around? I know you always had family dinners and your mom loved to cook and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they both worked incredibly hard. We also had a grandparent living with us, my dad's mom, my grandmother, and she was kind of child care while both my parents worked, and oftentimes like multiple jobs. So they worked really hard, not in the restaurant industry, although my dad did full dumplings for a really long time when he first came over. But there was definitely a home life and like a home element.
So the work-life balance was hard work,
Hard
good
work.
ethics for working hard,
Yeah.
but being
definitely.
around, like you
Yeah.
could remember those dinners. Can't beat that in a way.
No, that's
You know.
definitely the goal.
So with Lay, I guess at least at the beginning you want to be around. It's a lot of night times, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You okay with being away? I mean, you stated, support Sean, kids go down, they sleep through.
I think
But
it's
you're okay.
finding that balance. I think so much of motherhood and openings, unfortunately, is you figure it out a little as you go. And so that's the plan now. But like, I haven't really missed bedtimes ever. So, maybe I do that for 2 weeks and it doesn't feel right. And then we have to find a different fix. The plan right now is if I'm missing bedtime, my day is going to start later because I'll spend time with the kids in the morning.
So you'll get one end
Yeah.
for sure.
But I think the
So-
key is flexibility and being able to
So
adapt.
your youngest is what, about 6 months? So you haven't found the rhythm yet.
No,
You're still working
definitely
on it.
not.
Yeah.
Lay hasn't opened yet, so
Yeah,
we will find the rhythm.
We're sitting at Lay. Beautiful wood on the walls, fixtures, wines everywhere. But, there's work to get it open in the next few days, which is, Annie, Friday, June. What's
6.
June 6th is
Yeah.
the opening. By the time this podcast airs, it'll be right around then. So, best advice to working moms. We're not writing a book here, just
Oh,
the
gosh.
things that,
Yeah.
don't overthink it. I'm looking at two things. I'm looking at, what Annie thinks, because you told some of your experiences, but also, people in hospitality. It's a tough thing to wrestle. What are some of the things you think of?
I think it's having a strong support system, whether that is friends who live nearby, partners who are there to cheer you on, business partners to look after the business. Jess has been immense in all of this.
Well, being surrounded by the right people,
Being surrounded by the right
but
people.
letting them do stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And not being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I think it's really people and support people. You seem to be doing it well. So, all right. So it seems like things are going well at King and Jupiter. As a matter of fact, at King, the New York Times just came out with their annual 100 best restaurants. And King was on the list last year, in the top 30. This year, remarkably, in a good way, you're in the top 10. You're number 6. And you said something to me interesting, and I think even in the press, that it's amazing after 10 years, to
Yes.
still...
Well, sorry, 9 years. But
9
yes,
years.
9 years.
Pushing a decade.
Yeah.
But how do you stay fresh? How do you stay relevant? Is it all the same plan? Changing menus, passion. What's not the secret? But even you said you were a little surprised to land at 6.
Well, I think we're surprised because New York loves the shiniest, newest
Right.
thing.
If you read
And-
Eater and Infatuation, you get knocked off by the shiny new toy.
Yeah. But I think what keeps King going is, again, the people. And, we're still there, all the time, every day with our team. I think restaurants are living, breathing things, and you can't neglect them.
Like
They
a bottle
need
of wine.
exactly they need attention and they need care, and they're constantly evolving. And the two hardest things are food and people. Neither is ever just consistent.
I
You
know.
can't set it and
That's
forget
what
it.
makes the business hard and interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's very much the case with King. That's in the DNA of King, with the daily changing menu, with the daily changing wine list. And so I think that's what keeps it going. And, on top of that, you have an incredible team that devotes every day to King. Our chef, Tina, we call her Tina Angeles. She's been there for almost 7 years now.
Oh, wow.
Our general manager has been there for almost 4 years now. So our team is just incredibly solid.
That's consistency and the right people.
Yeah.
So it's been almost a decade since you opened King. I'm curious because, again, off air, we talked about how you were 25 when you started there or whatever. You were more implying, not that I was a kid but you were young and, jumping in early. In those 9-10 years, talk to me about some of the observations you have about the business, wine. Are there any, and it's not like they have to be important or you have to, but do you have any what has changed or what's different, harder, easier?
Yeah. I can only speak from personal experience, but I think what guides us is to build the thing that only you can build, which is a different way of saying, like, you have to really, like, again, restaurants, any hospitality, like a wine bar, takes a lot. And unless the concept is really true to who you are and something you really believe in, it's really hard for that to stick around for 10 years. And so I think, King was a restaurant that was the only restaurant we could have built back then. And Lei is the only wine bar that I can build now. And it's the place that I've wanted to go to, that I wished existed for a really long time. And I think it's something that, like, is truly of me. And so otherwise, to open something for a concept or to open something, I think that's really hard.
So
to imbue with
expand on what you
personality.
just said. You wanted to open a wine bar for you. I'm sure if you and I sat down and said, what is that? We'd probably agree on 9 out of 10 things. But what are the things, that...
Well, I actually just always wanted, every year on my birthday, I was like, I want to eat great Chinese food and drink great wine. And, we did BYO.
That's a tough match, unless it's a BYOB.
Yeah, it's a tough match. But I, growing up eating Chinese food, I knew there was so much more to the cuisine than what we have seen in New York. I would say now there's more regional cuisine, Chinese cuisine, than ever before. But I think I just wanted something that was thought through. So dishes that would taste great with wine, with a great wine list, with great glassware, with a nice ambiance.
But typical of how you run your businesses, with an eye towards detail.
Yeah.
And
that didn't quite exist. And so that's just been the thing that I've always wanted to create.
Right. We'll see. So further answer that question for me. Let's say you walk into an elevator and there are two people talking and they said, I was just at this cool place the other night, Lei Wine Bar. Small, cool, funky. It was in Chinatown. We didn't even know it was there. What would you hope people would say? Like, if you were sitting there, it sucked. And, what are the things that would make you so happy? We discussed a little of it, but...
I think there's 3 things. The first is, I would hope they say the team was so amazing.
Okay.
They were so warm. I learned something new about wine. I was introduced to something that I didn't even know I was looking for. 2, I hope they say, and the food tasted so great. I didn't even know Chinese food could be that way. And it tasted great with the wine. And 3, I would hope they say, and then we went on and had third dinner at Great New York Noodle Town around the corner and had a great night.
Took it all in.
Yeah, exactly.
The neighborhood and everything. Yeah, I mean, people and the food and obviously the wine. It's a wine bar. I think you're going to get there. I want to ask you a question. I hope it doesn't, hit a sore note, but I'm really curious and inquisitive. And we talk a little about this off air. But when you opened the business with King, you had 2 other partners, Claire and Jess. And then Claire went off and opened Stissing. When stuff like that happens, and I'm sure because you guys were close, it was communicated, but do you go like, what the, and say, well, now she's going to be distracted with that, or she's not going to be here, or that wasn't the original vision. Is your relationship so good that it's not an issue, or like anybody, you have a little anxiety when something like that happens?
I think partnerships are always, they're a full relationship. I always joke that like after Sean, or as competing with Sean, is sometimes like I speak to Jess sometimes more than I talk to Sean on certain days. But I think what we always wanted, the three of us, was room for each other to grow and do our own
So
thing.
that was built in.
Yeah.
So that would, because of that statement, anything wouldn't be a major surprise.
I think we all wanted the best for each other. Of course, the actual like execution is tough. You figure things out. Life happens for each of us in different ways. But like Clara's had incredible success at Stissing. We're so happy for her. She has a beautiful life up there. She's coming tonight for friends and family.
Oh, nice.
And again, we chat about motherhood. I'm always asking her, is this normal? And so I think...
Annie, you're too nice. That wasn't the question. But that's part of the answer. When something like that happens, are you stuck in the moment? Like, Jesus, the team's sort of either broken up or she's distracted, or you're fine that everything will kind of work. The letting her do that thing, I understand you articulated. But for the moment, it's like, wait a second, does this mean more work for me, or is that part going to fall? Do you worry about that? Or
yeah, of course.
But it all worked out.
I think, yes. I think obviously that journey is difficult, but we had a lot of hard conversations. And I think you learn, like I learned along the way, my commitment to King. Like I was like, oh, wow, like I'm really in it for the long haul. And I think that for me at least clarified like where my commitment laid.
Right.
And I think similarly for Jess, that was also the case, which is why we're still there all the time and pouring so much.
So with the opening of this, maybe it parallels a little where one of the partners goes off and does something, knowing you a little from afar, everything is cool with you stepping into this to get it going.
Yes.
Nobody's worried because you're a floor guy. You got big eyes and big hands. You're picking up dirty napkins and looking at stuff and all that. You being around is much better than not, but everything functions both ways. You'll do that at the wine bar.
Yeah.
Everything else will be fine, right?
Yeah. And I think King, in terms of service, we have an incredible team there. And King is the type of restaurant, actually, if you're even like a little bit of an extra pair of hands, there's nowhere to stand. Like sometimes we look at our staffing and we're like, it's not for a lack of wanting to add another server or runner to the floor. It's simply that there's nowhere for them to go. And so King, we pop in, we say hi, but it's not the same as it was.
Right.
Jess and I are working on something else together.
Besides this?
Yes. So, that will be kind of taking up a little bit more of our time and attention.
When, I'm not going to probe beyond what you can't tell me. Well, what's the timeline? Is it next year? Or is it this year?
It is it's a little bit TBD.
Okay. Is it another venue?
End of this year. Yeah.
I give the Rockefeller Center people credit for reaching out to the right people. You guys, Le Rock, there's some, great, the Atomics people and all that. You kind of earn that at King. It's like, hey, we would love to have a King type place here and all that. Is that how this came about, or this was
completely different? I think.
Annie, your energy is amazing. The wine bar hasn't opened. You have less than a 1-year-old kid, and you're working on another project.
It's again,
I have a feeling you may have a third kid.
No, God, no. I say I reserve the right to optionality if we're bored in 4 years' time. But
oh yeah, you're going to be bored in 4 years.
Yeah, I think Jupiter is having its best year yet.
Is it?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is you get to open up outside with the skating rink floor.
Under Prometheus, it's the most iconic. Like whenever I have friends from out of town, I always take them there because you're literally sitting under the Prometheus fountain having a frozen Negroni. Like, really nothing could be better. And then we're collabing with Pebble Bar for the Rinkside stuff this year as
Is
well.
that the guys in the
Yeah, the cocktail
where
bar.
Magnolia, or
Yes,
used to
exactly.
be upstairs and all that? Yeah. That's cool. That was sort of a vast wasteland, of touristy restaurants, and now
Yeah.
it's, you read any, Infatuation Eater, any restaurant stuff, where to eat for the theater or
Yeah.
in Midtown, you're always there.
It's great.
Which is a nice thing. All right, so we're talking to Annie Shih. Annie is a partner at King and Jupiter. We're sitting at Annie's new wine bar, Lay, which is about to open in a couple of days. When we come back, we're going to talk about Lay and what you're doing here, and we're also going to invite your wine director, Matt Turner, to sit with us to answer the hard questions that you can't answer or don't know. So you're listening to the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back with Annie and Matt.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korin is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant from French to Pan-Asian to American. And that is why they're located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korin's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the rarest natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services, from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korin is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit Korin.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with Annie Shih. And Matt, why don't you come and sit down and join us? Matt Turner is Annie's wine director. And I think even in the conversation we had the first half hour, I think with you, people is, if not the key ingredient, one of the top ingredients.
It's 100%
So
the key
obviously
ingredient.
opening a wine bar and bringing a guy like Matt in, you're laying a lot of responsibility and all that. So before we get to Matt, how did you get to Matt?
It's a great question. I think we were introduced by a mutual friend.
Okay. Didn't cross paths,
No, we had cross paths.
but not, overly chatty or hanging or anything.
No, I knew Matt from when he was at Niche Niche,
Right.
and then Risholi, and then he moved to Hero. So, we had known of each other for a really long time. I'd always admired what he'd done and, the lists that he had built. I had not thought of Matt when I was looking for a wine director, but we were put in touch by a mutual friend.
Oh, so that was a
Yeah.
good, you owe that friend
Yeah,
a glass.
exactly.
Matt, before I get to you, because I want to hear about your path, Annie, give me a little history of how Lay came about. Is this something that's been floating in your head before King, during King, after King?
It's been floating around in my head since before King, not quite in this iteration, but a version of it for a really long time. When I was still in finance, I was taking a restaurant operations course at NYU with the idea of trying to open something with Chinese food and wine.
When was that?
That was in 2014. I was
Okay.
supposed to stage at Barbudo, actually, with Jonathan Waxman. I cold called him because I didn't know anything about the business. And then I ended up getting the chance to move to London with my job, which is then where I met Claire and then Jess. So everything took a really wild, very different, wonderful turn. But this was always the original dream. And a lot of friends and family have heard me talk about a Chinese wine bar for so long now. So it's kind of amazing that it exists in 3D.
So you get into the business, you get in successfully with your friends. Do you get so distracted you're not thinking about the wine bar just because it's hard to get to? Or
Well, I think
when can I get to that? When can I get to that?
it wasn't really that. It was more, we were so busy with King, and then once we found our feet with King, it was COVID, and then we were opening Jupiter. So I think it wasn't really intentionally putting it off, but it was kind of finding the right moment for it.
Right.
And I also think that people's understanding or appreciation of more nuanced Chinese cooking, that's been a recent change, with the popularity of Korean food, Thai food. Like
Omakase, sushi is huge.
Yeah, I think if I'd opened it 10 years ago, I think this is the right time.
Right.
In other words,
The market has a better, I wouldn't say understanding, but exposure, or understands it.
totally.
When you were thinking about that, you go back to 2014, you had an idea. How much is the vision the same, or how much has it evolved? Are the basic tenets of what you wanted to do then here, or it's totally different look?
I mean, it's completely different, but I think the heart of it is the same. I think when it comes to the wine, I think where, there's stuff that we all love, the higher end blue chip producers, but I think there's also so much that is accessible and delicious. I mean, there's more good wine being made now than ever. And I think we're really lucky to show a lot of that on the list. I think what we're really excited about doing is, say you're someone who's only ever ordered a glass of wine, like how can we bring you to a place where you want to or feel comfortable ordering a bottle of wine?
Right.
That's a really key guest moment for us.
I think people, pricing, selection has a lot to do with that. Do you see this? I didn't have this question on paper, but everyone I talk to talks about this. Do you see changes in consumers' habits? This is going to be kind of a hip place. You're going to have a range of age here, younger people, old people like me would be glad to come and have a good. Do you see consumption down? Do you see drinking habits changing, drinking less, looking for lower alcohol, natural wines, mixology?
Matt has been on the floor much more recently than I have, so I will let him take that one.
Yeah, those things are all the case. People are generally, I think, focusing or drinking less wine on average. I think we get the younger generation.
Definitely consumption is down.
Consumption of alcohol in general, I think, is a bit lower in a lot of groups, especially younger generations, but also specifically with wine. I think a couple of things with that is like price concerns with a lot of people. So I think if you are drinking and you are in the younger generation, you are often concerned about the value of what you're getting and or how much you're spending. And so for some people, that means kind of thinking more by the glass as options instead of purchasing maybe bottles of wine off wine lists. This also kind of brings a bigger focus into cocktails too, because a lot of people find lots of enjoyment out of complex cocktails.
Are you doing cocktails here?
No.
Just wine.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I like about Andy? You smiled. You didn't turn red. He's like, why are you asking me that? You're not. This is a wine bar.
It's a wine
Good
bar.
night.
It's literally the first question that Matt asked me when we started chatting.
Yeah.
What was your intention with that question? Just to know, or you were advocating, or?
I guess a combination of both, maybe. I think it's, for me personally, wine is like the foremost of what I want to be doing and what I want to be sharing with people and making accessible to people. And so it's a little bit less complex to do that when you don't have liquor that's also in the same location, especially when people are often thinking about
5 shelves for bitters.
Yeah, you need a lot of storage for everything, and you move through a lot of stuff.
Organic, freshly squeezed lime juice.
That's right. Yeah, and you have all the citrus, but it's for wine people, it's. For us, we want to just do wine, basically.
So consumption is down. There's been a shift in who's drinking. I think as we go forward, the things I want to talk to you about will address those issues, what you're doing and all of that. But before I forget, your path to here. Go backwards.
Go backwards, okay.
First of all, where are you from?
I'm from Florida originally.
Where?
I grew up in Jacksonville, and then I moved to the Tampa Bay area for a little while.
I won't hold that against you.
I try not to bring it up.
When did you kind of jump into hospitality? When and where?
I got into hospitality. I feel like for a lot of people, it's maybe late for general hospitality. I was 21 and I got in through wine, basically. So I was working at.
What was that pathway?
Essentially, I just found out that I really, really loved wine for kind of an interesting reason. I sort of discovered that winemaking was not what I thought it was. And then when I went to go discover what it actually was, you start tasting those producers making really incredible artworks and
more than what's in the glass, the
exactly
process, the people, and
everything. And then the more you learn about how they're making the wine, the more you learn about the person and the identity, and then
That's
from that the place, and that's everybody's story. You roll into that. So I figured that out at like 21. I started tasting a lot of wine and decided I'm going to give this wine thing a try because I really, really love it. And I was able to get into hospitality and restaurants that way. I had a very good mentor down in Tampa who used to work up here in New York for a while. And he hired me. He was like, you have no restaurant experience, but you're obsessed with wine and you have enough knowledge at this point where I can help you out. It was a wine bar down there as well. Again, only wine. And so ended up just doing that. And I figured I'd give myself some time to decide if this is
when do you
thing.
come to New York?
I moved to New York in 2020. I signed a lease for March 1st, 2020.
Really?
Really
March
poor timing.
1st.
Yeah. So
That was like a week before the shit hit the fan.
Exactly.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah. I decided in 19
wait, you
that I
came March 20th for a job, or you came here looking for a job?
I moved to New York for wine. That was the reason. And so in late 2019, in 2019, I decided I was going to move up
What
here.
did you know? Did you know this place is a cool place for wine? This guy, like
That's
Aldo
right.
Somm, is like, a god, or this guy's doing.
I used to visit a lot.
At Popine is doing fun stuff. You knew little things.
Yeah, and I had some connections. So I had some job offers, a number of job offers in 2019. So therefore, okay, that's good. I'll get up there. I'll figure out who I want to work for. I signed the lease for March 1st. COVID happens. That's a problem. There are no more job offers. I managed. My landlord suggests
That's the
I
whole
delay.
podcast. You lived through that.
Yeah, delay moving an extra month. So I ended up coming up a little bit later than the original lease date, and then almost immediately, essentially, start working at Niche Niche actually, which is very, very fortunate. And
So Niche Niche was kind of the first big real.
Essentially, yeah. For me up here, the first place I started, it was really Air Champagne Parlor and Niche Niche. I was working.
So
at both
you
those
got into the
locations.
Ariel Orb.
That's right.
And Airs and Niche Niche,
Mhm.
and then Kenneth came along.
Yep, Kenneth came along
And
very
you-
shortly after I joined and became the group beverage director for them. And then we just continued. I just continued to want to work with him and Air and in that group. And then we did Niche Niche for a while, and then we opened Roscioli. And then the plans are always in the work also for current restaurant that's open for them, Heroes and Pearl Box as well.
Right.
So I opened each of those
New shiny
locations.
things.
Yeah.
So two things. I think did we talk about this earlier? What got you to Matt, and why was it right to leave? So start with Annie. Why is Matt sitting here? How'd that come about?
So we were introduced through a mutual friend when I was looking for a wine director.
Is that
and
hard? Because I have
it's
friends who
so
own restaurants
hard.
and they're looking for somms, and I go, I know everyone in the business. I've even emailed you 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Somebody looking for. It's impossible.
That's part of the post-COVID challenge.
Okay.
Is the brain drain in the wine industry, and there's just still not enough wine professionals.
So the task is hard. Now,
It
how
is
do you
hard.
get to Matt?
So we were introduced through a mutual friend, and I had obviously known Matt from when we were neighbors. And when we had our first chat, it's just, it's so funny. Like, we have not the same palate, but we have a very similar palate. And I think that's incredibly important. We went through, I think I asked, like, what are your favorite producers? And then we spent almost like 2 hours talking about producers. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really straightforward. Like, we love the same producers.
So everything checked out.
Yeah.
All right. So stay there for a second. She said similar palates.
Mhm.
I don't want long answers, and I also want a producer too. But what are the obvious similarities?
I think a lot
Love
of it is,
or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think we love all wine that's made in a way that most people consider wine well made, but we have our own personal definitions of such, whether it's the winemaking style or the end result of the wine, right? I think it's really important for us, like farming of the producer, that we're familiar with how they're doing it. This is the obvious thing, but also that they're making the right decisions in their own their own context.
So each of you give me examples of that.
Examples of that from here. I
Well,
mean,
obviously anywhere here is,
Right.
what you believe in.
Yeah, I mean, all the producers here are definitely producers that we both believe in. There are some that one of us is more familiar with than the other one, which is really a great part about that, because there's some kind of specialties in other
So
areas.
I'm looking at Michelle Chappelle. I'm looking at Arno Roberts. I'm looking at Tegan Pasqualacca. I'm
Right.
looking at Chianti Montepero. I'm looking. There's everything here. It's great.
Yeah.
There's a Hermitage. Is that a Hermitage
Yeah.
up there?
Yeah,
there's a
there's-
Brunello next
I'm
to
a big
it.
Northern Rhone guy.
Yeah,
I
me
think,
too.
So
that's
actually,
a desert island.
Guillaume Cloussel at Cloussel Roque is a perfect example of the type of person that I think is really important for farming and for his region. He is the leader
That's
of
the example I'm
the
looking
current
for.
generation. He knows everything in that area so impeccably well amongst his vines, everybody's, the history of the region, and his reaction to year after year, and his dedication to developing his winery and his family's winery, and just making incredible wines year after year from certain particular locations on Côte Rôtie.
Let's go back to the original question. Why'd you leave where you left, which was a good gig with good people, to come here, which is a good gig with good people?
Right. Yeah.
But why now? And
why now? I mean,
good time.
Yeah, I wanted to really, I think, aggressively refocus on wine.
There was a little less of that going on, and here
there is a lot of wine happening.
It could be like the 79% to the 92% thing.
Yeah. So but for me, again, going back to we're talking about liquor, there was a really large liquor program
that's
prior, and there's a lot of reasons and combinations to build up. But for me, I wanted to get back into something smaller. I really feel like I work very well in very small rooms, kind of wine bar leaning rooms, that sort of style is where I feel fulfilled and really enjoy. And so combination of the depth of, lists that I knew Annie would want to have, as well as the style of service, the location, a little bit of everything, and really a big refocus on wine. And for me, wine by the bottle has always been the thing that I really, really grasp onto. I think that's most Soms, that's why we do this. But going back and thinking about it, that's the really big thing for me to kind of make this change.
All right, so let's talk about those specifics. Let's talk about the wine list, which encompasses to me, the size, how many selections. Are you specializing in certain regions? I'm guessing there's a bunch of personal faves in here. I'm curious what that is. Interesting wines. I think I read somewhere you have a few Chinese wines.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the wine list first of all, how big is it? To start,
it's around 350 to maybe growing to 400 as we speak.
Yes.
I think we are dealing with the classic problem with people who love wine is that there's just never enough wine. And so the list will hopefully grow, but we're just very limited in terms of storage.
Yeah.
It's a global list, which I'm super psyched about because, at King and Jupiter, it's always been heavily French and Italian focused, which this list still is. But
so if the largest lean is anywhere, it's French and Italian.
It's
French, but this is
French,
it's French
for sure, French. Yeah.
But this is a global list.
Absolutely.
So you said French right away. You both agreed. Is the second biggest, selection, is it Italian or not necessarily?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
So then let's push
German.
that aside.
And maybe Germany.
Yeah, maybe German.
All right. So Germany, mostly Rieslings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great with
Chardonnay,
Asian food.
Yeah.
All right. Then where do we go? Tell me about, what was important to you, about what you wanted to have, who you wanted to have, other regions. Like I see Envenate, Canary Islands.
Of course.
I think the timing was incredibly fortuitous, but my friend Camden has been trying to import Chinese wines for a really long time. And I actually first met her in Shanghai through another mutual friend. And obviously this project had, I've been looking for 2 years. It was just never clear when it was going to happen. ditto with her import company. I was like, when is it going to happen? She was like, I don't know. There's these crazy tariffs happening. And it just so happens that her wines landed right before the tariffs hit.
Oof.
And right in time for us to open with it. So really could not have planned that better. But she is bringing over Chinese producers, very small, independent Chinese producers.
Does she fit the bill that we talked about? Thoughtful producers, you know, people
100%.
that farm thoughtfully.
I think in China,
Because I don't know what the regulations are there. I mean, you could put
there are
antifreeze
none.
in the wine, you know.
Totally.
so-
I think you have like the really large wineries.
So she's in tune to that.
Yes.
That community. Now, have you tasted through these things?
Yeah, she's had a couple tastings.
And is it more I want to have Chinese wines, or these wines are most excellent?
I think it's a combination. I think I'm always curious about new wine regions and places that are experimenting or finding
it
their
out there.
identity. Is it the best Pinot Noir in the world?
No.
But like
I
that's
get
not the
that.
question necessarily. There's some really interesting stuff going on. There actually is an excellent Pinot Noir from a female winemaker named Emma Gao in Silver
GAO?
Heights. GAO, yeah, that we have on the list. We have some more experimental things like this pet nat that's made with jasmine tea and muscat, black muscat, or this variety of peach. So I think there's some really fun things going on there.
That's like a co-fermentation almost, right? The tea and
Yeah,
the other stuff. People are doing that here.
we have a lot of German wine. We have
Yeah.
some
German wine intentionally because it's very good and it's very good with the food.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me about interesting stuff.
Interesting stuff. Oh, everything's interesting, but
Well, I think that's what makes the list. But how about personal faves? Like
Yeah.
you're in Northern Rhones, so am I.
I love Northern
So
Rhone.
indiscriminately, I would have that on my list.
Yeah, I think when we were talking also about things that pair really well with the food too, it's also important to have other regions that we focus on and things like that. So places like Jura are very important to me. I've had some really wonderful mentors over the years who've gotten me into South African wine, and so I'd like
Good
to
spot.
build. We'll open with a
They're
number of
whites.
whites and red, and so
red.
open with a couple of different SKUs, but then continue to expand that. Annie's a big fan of Greek wine, and I think those are also excellent
They're here?
wines.
You
yeah,
you have a bunch of Greek
yeah,
wine?
we have them in the
Yeah.
building.
So, a two-pronged question. When you put together the wine list or when you started buying, how much energy, time was it to make the wine compatible with the food? Was that part of it? It should be a lot of it, some of it.
So the wine was the starting point.
Okay.
Wine,
You started with the wine.
yes, and
All
that's
right.
what makes it a wine bar is that the wine list led. So we built the wine list with the wines that any of us wine lovers would want to drink, and then it was about crafting a menu that would fit that.
Off that, right.
And I think the approach is not so much like a dish to glass pairing because
That's not the
That's not the
intention of
intention.
either one.
yeah, and it's the same at King. You know, when we sell wine and we sell a bottle, it has to pair well with the entire meal. So it's very much that same ideology here. It's like a bottle that can take you through the full menu.
So, Asian food has a certain profile. Did you pivot a little? Like maybe we need a little more Riesling just because of the food after you design the wine? You fill in?
Yeah, I think there's so much more to Chinese cuisine than what is popular necessarily. I think sometimes it's the bolder, kind of like punchier flavors that are more easily understood. I think growing up eating Chinese food every single day of my life, there are much more delicate flavors, and you just have to pull from the right regions and the right sources.
Right.
So it was really about crafting a menu with our chef Patty that would kind of eat well with a variety of wines. And that's just editing and curation on the
Right.
food side.
So the most interesting wines seem to be from China. It's kind of cool and unusual to have a nice Greek selection.
Yeah.
Matt, do Northern Rhones
Yeah.
pair well with the food? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's we start with the wine. So the wine's the important part. We will always make things happen and be delicious with each other. I think there are a number of things that do pair really excellently depending on the dishes. Like, if you want to get into some Northern Rhone white, it's not the most popular category of a lot of people.
Forget
but,
about that.
Things like
These are some of the most underrated wines.
Right, yeah, like Laurent Fayol's Saint-Péray and people like that, Domaine de Lorient and Klopp, wines like that. They're those, kind of singular Saint-Pérays maybe.
Were you here? Did you collaborate from the beginning on the wine list, or Matt came after you got things started and then you plugged him in? How did the list today come about?
Yeah, so Matt joined May 7th. So
where were you at May 7th? Were you already ordering wines, or had a
no, we didn't have our license yet.
Oh, yeah. Did you have a list in your mind?
Yeah, I had already tasted a bunch, and again, it's like when I asked Matt to send over like a list of his favorite producers, and I was like, oh, well, most of them are already on the list.
Yeah,
so
we have the same wish list basically.
And then Matt's been adding stuff, as he's tasted.
It's very tasting oriented. So like any of the things that aren't like the blue chip that we know will sell have been tasted as of late whenever we can to make sure that things are drinking really beautifully right now. We talked about, the vintage things change a lot. So it's important to really know what those things will be like in order to make them accessible to the guests.
I don't see the word clash as something that's really going on here, personality wise and vision wise, but do you clash on anything? Like, do you insist in a good way? Like, why don't we have Northern Rhone, or why don't we have more, or blah, blah, blah? You're all,
yeah.
I think that's why he's here, right, Annie?
Fit as well. Like, that's not really, I think, how either of us like collaborate or manage. I think there's stuff that we want to bring on that we simply can't because of physical space. Yeah. And the list will evolve. Like, things will come on and come off because that's the nature of wine. Like, there is an infinite supply of stuff. So it'll definitely
I want to
change.
talk to you about that. Before that, just you mentioned it, and I think it's important, but I don't know how important here. The Buy the Glass program. Yeah. You're going to have how many,
right now to open, it'll be 1 sparkling, 4 whites, an orange wine, a rosé, 3 reds, and then representation of some non-alcoholic items as well to pour. So
now,
like Murray and items.
Do you have latitude with Buy the Glass to do things, that you wouldn't do by the bottle?
Sorry, what is that?
Well, are there things you would do by the glass where you wouldn't buy the bottle?
I think it's.
I'm sorry the question's not more clear. I'm trying to figure out.
Meaning, like,
what can you do with Buy the Glass that you're not doing? What do you try to accomplish? Buy the Glass.
Okay. So everything that is on the Buy the Glass, if it were not on the Buy the Glass, would have representation on the list, just on the list itself.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to put anything Buy the Glass that I wouldn't already list on the list for people.
So there's no Buy the Glass only entries.
No, it's currently only listed on Buy the Glass, but like if it were not, it would come over. It's important that those are wines that would overlap for a full list for us as well.
But I think Matt put a lot of thought into what categories we're hitting with Buy the Glass. So, for example, we have a Côte du Rhône because that is something that is recognizable to people, recognizable to maybe someone who doesn't drink a lot of wine, but it's a producer that he loves that drinks delicious. It's like the best Côte du Rhône I've had.
Good price value, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of your bigger red, when people like that
definitely.
profile.
It kind of hits a perfect thing for almost anybody that's interested in that type of category, whether they're interested in the name of the producer itself and they know that the wine will be really good.
I guess that was my question. I couldn't articulate it, but you have to drill down. Like the Côte du Rhône is a perfect choice for a Buy the Glass because of the price point, because of the type of wine it is, the body, the region, and all of that, and familiarity. Yeah. So a lot of thought goes into the Buy the Glass.
Absolutely.
And you have to have orange wine for the kids.
Yes. I love orange wine.
Well, me too. I did a panel with Sasha Radikon or whatever.
Oh, amazing.
Those are orange wines.
Yeah. But I think that's, I think in 2025, it like is just a slot. Like you just have to have an orange by the glass.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm sure, what's the orange wine you're going to open with?
For us, we have a Catarato from Salvatore Marino Turi. We are pouring a white that also has a little skin contact, but drinks kind of more minerals white, which is Lafite Noir as well. It's a Chenin. So like the orange is a little bit more of the classic, like a little bit more fruit, a little bit more
Right.
structure, and then all the whites kind of fill in other textural categories and things like that as well. But
Actually, I was really impressed when we were picking by the glass selections. Matt would like not leave it open, but have it open and then check back in on it on like day 2, day 3, day 4, and just like
Many
make
days.
sure that the wines were still tasting good, which is such an important part of by the glass selection. What tastes great pop and pour is not going to necessarily taste good.
That's a good way to evaluate it.
super important. I think wine in general, we've been talking about tasting wine over time and like how wine, evolves and evaluating it as it does so. It's really important to have wine that is delicious, and even if it changes over X amount of days, obviously for cost reasons, but also just for excellence reasons, right? Like
It's
with
funny
that.
because Valerie at Trink, she wrote a story about a wine she had, and it was in her fridge for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And she picked it up 2 weeks later, and she
Yeah.
said it was awesome.
This is the
Yeah.
kind of stuff I'm
Yeah,
like interested
yeah.
in talking
I mean,
about.
the evolution of all that.
Like, do we even know what people are making if we don't taste their wine over time? That kind of stuff. So yeah, it's the by the glass is really kind of particularly selected. All of course tasted within the last month, basically, just to
Right.
confirm that's
Have
what's
your-
drinking nicely.
This is a question for each of you. You've been at this, 10 years. You've been at it that longer. Have your wine tastes changed? I'll answer first. I mean, I'm sure your horizon is open, but have they changed through the years?
Definitely.
What are some of the, because that's personal, and I think ultimately it would reflect on the list too.
I think I have increasingly been interested in low intervention wines
Okay.
and things that maybe taste or like seem a bit more natural
Are you more aware now than then?
than when I first started. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because when I did the podcast in 2016, my sixth show was Isabelle Leger on, and when she left there, I go, "What the hell just happened?"
Yeah.
There's like this world out there I know nothing
Yeah.
about, and it sounds right to me.
Yeah.
So I wound up going to raw wine, and
Totally.
that's what I believe in today, and that's what it sounds like. You are, and that's what the list. I mean, I read a write-up of this place somewhere, and they described the list as low intervention.
I think that's probably the easiest way to encapsulate it, because you just
Ah.
want the wine to taste like the wine, whether
Right.
that's someone that is quote unquote more traditional or more classic, or someone who seems to be part of like the natural wine movement. It's just as long as it tastes great and it reflects the wine as it should, then it's great.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. What about you?
Yeah,
You
I-
had to have. I mean, you were really. I mean, both of you were kind of neophytes.
I started almost the other. I started extremely minimal because of the way I got into wine. It was like wine making centralized, and so I was like,
So you keyed in on that.
I keyed in on
early.
like, what are the people doing? Like they're like almost barely touching it. I want to taste that, and then like
So-
I almost like learned about winemaking by tasting how almost involved winemaking was, starting as very low that I could get my hands on to as as much as a lot of the classic traditional
That's
producers
pretty
at very
cool.
high ends. It's almost the opposite way in some way, and so I think everyone's still working through that transition.
There's not
always.
a podcast I do with a winemaker, and it's almost cliche now, that doesn't say everything starts in the vineyard,
Yeah,
and the complexity of that answer of what you do in the vineyard.
right.
Has everything to do with it, however you farm, biodynamic, organic, regeneratively, and all of that. I like that. I like that you started there, and I like that you kind of, wound up there, and now here's your palette, of all those wines. Now, New York's a pretty good place to be involved with wine. Can you guys get what you want? Like, is there this allotment nonsense going on? Are you forced to buy? Are things so allotted you want it, but you can't get it?
I mean, there's definitely the allocation game without question. But again, there is more great wine out than there ever was. And so I'm never worried about.
You're not backed into any.
No, I'm not
Mhm.
worried about like not having great wine to sell. I think you'll see it in the way we price our list. We're not precious about holding on to bottles for the sake of looking good on the list. We want to sell wine because there's going to be always something great to buy.
And there's nothing so important that you have to have it on the list. You could live without it. I mean, there's regions.
Yeah, I think it's important to get people to drink those things. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to come into the building and go, oh, that really important thing that most people just want is to stand on the list. I can drink that here, and I will drink that here. And you don't really understand that you want to drink it until you taste it. and
Right.
drink it. So, that's the idea is
I
to
think-
get things in people's hands.
Yeah. And I think we talk a lot about like, if you're getting into wine now, if you're a som now, like it's really hard to drink those benchmark wines because they're incredibly expensive.
I know.
And so how do you like flesh out your wine education if you're not drinking those bottles?
I
And
know.
that's something that we're hoping to be a part of, is to get people in here and opening those bottles.
As much as we all love the wines we just talked about, I still see people in our business Instagramming like Diamond Creek and 90s Bordeaux's, and people still, or an old Italian, whatever. People still get off with that. I've asked this question at least a half a dozen times because of the type of people I sit with. You would know for sure. I think you would know. Is it harder to design a tighter, smaller selection wine list than having, the leeway where it's a restaurant, you have more space, it's a bigger menu, the check may be bigger? They're both fun. What's harder?
A smaller list.
It is.
Yeah.
Curation.
Yeah.
You totally agree, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's really, as we were just talking about, there's so much great wine to access, and there's great wine everywhere, and we're at like a point in wine history where we are having lots of incredible producers. So narrowing that down when you are a
But
big
you
wine
will-
person is hard.
Annie said to me, you weren't around before you opened. There's wine everywhere. You don't have space. But as you open and bottles sell and move
Yeah.
off, that'll create more of an opening. But you will change things up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, certain stuff you'll always see if you come in here, but
course.
things will pop up or whatever.
Yeah. I think in general, like when things happen is cyclical anyway, right? You get certain releases at certain points a year. So you get kind of rotational change with that. With seasons, there's a difference in what kind of people want to drink those things. By the glass will rotate pretty consistently too, as well as the lists will come and
I mean,
down.
I actually think it's almost harder to have a static list because
Yeah.
you have like, how do you find wines that are guaranteed to be there 365 days
That's
of
a
the
good
year?
point.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if people think about that when
that's
they do it.
actually really hard. Like,
Unless you have a
But
warehouse, you can.
you
Yeah.
said to me earlier that, King, you change the menu a few times a week. You would do the wine list.
we print the wine
Was
list
that
almost
static
every week.
argument? Were you aware of it then, or you were more aware of it now?
I mean, we at King were limited by space and then money. We had no money.
Right.
So it
That
grew
doesn't
very
help.
naturally. But I think it's the same concept at King where like, by the time we run out of a wine, that wine's no longer in stock. Like they made X amount of bottles, it sells out, it's gone. And that's what makes it beautiful.
Can you get
Like,
people
it's
trained
limited.
to it and they come in and they'll buy two and you have none?
I think that's what
sucks.
keeps it fun and fresh for the wine team,
Yeah,
for the
no, I agree.
guests. You get to recommend and sell new things. I mean, it's what makes it difficult is that the wine admin for the SOMs is immense because you're constantly onboarding new wine, learning new wine, moving things around. That's what makes it really, really tough. But
Yeah.
I think for the guest, it's great to have a constantly changing wine list.
I agree. I want to wrap up soon. We're not done yet because I know we're in the middle of a wine bar that's literally being built up. I mean, laundry's being dropped off. So we all know this. A lot of wine bars have opened up in the past few years.
Yes.
There's no doubt. I mean, at different levels. How do you want to differentiate Lay from what's out there, or you don't let the out there noise get to you, but you are legitimately competing?
Yeah, I think that there isn't necessarily a wine bar that is offering the same food that we're offering.
So food is definitely,
Yeah, I think it's, it seems like crazy to have to say this in 2025, but the idea that wine can go with more than French or Italian food. I think there's still people who are like really surprised to hear that there's
Or
a Chinese menu.
Steak and Cab or Bordeaux.
Yeah.
That type of stuff.
So I think that pairing or that offering together is still surprising to some people. I think we're really excited by the location. We hope to be complementary to the businesses around here. There's so many great places to go for dinner, fewer places to go for a glass of wine in the neighborhood. And so we really envision a lot of people like going out to dinner in Chinatown and then wanting a nightcap or wanting, a glass of wine to start the night and popping in here before they go out and go on their way.
Because there's been a residential swell here through the years. I mean, not down the block, but
Chatham
Times
Towers,
Square, all of that stuff. Yeah. And a lot of those people are your market. So you're not worried about like a proliferation of too many wine bars. You don't see the world that way. All right. Last question, Annie. Are there things from King and Jupiter, that you learned that, work or made it a little easier to open this, or tenets of business that you've locked into there that have to be here?
Tenets of business.
Your business,
Okay.
you're not, NYU Stern Business School. Here's the top 10 tenets. Things you've done that like, we got to do it this way.
I think what I've learned, doing in terms of the pre-opening, doing as much as you can rather than hiring a professional to do it. For me,
like consultants or whatever?
Yeah, just like project managing as much of the construction as you can, being the person to make as much of the decisions of like what happens in the space.
So as much as you should delegate, for you being there on that.
Yeah, I like to be really hands-on with all of that. Not only are you saving money, but I also think that's where you really bring in the personality of a space and you give it an identity. I think that's
where you get the brushed nickel doorknob instead of the brass one from the contractor who didn't listen to you.
Yeah.
Because you're there.
You'll notice that every plate that covers an outlet that is on the wood panel is stainless steel.
That's what I'm saying. It would drive you nuts if it was like a white painted one or whatever.
Everything that is on white paint is white. Little details like that. Only like not many people will pay attention to those details, but that's something that like was really important to Rachel, my childhood friend who designed the space, and really important to me.
So that's, I said that earlier. That's who you are. That's how you do it. That's what you've done and continue to do. That's what you brought here.
Yeah.
That hands-on attention to detail.
Yeah. And I would say working with friends, whether that's like Matt, whether that is Rachel, who just launched her studio, Vine Projects. We did it from SF to New York.
Nice.
But it's because we're friends.
All right, we wrap up the show with 2 segments. The first segment will take a little longer, but it's up to you guys. We do a thing called the wine list. We've done over 300 of them on the Grape Nation. We've asked every guest the same 5 questions. Annie has done it once before. I will ask you the question. Annie, you go first. Matt, you go second. Don't dwell on the answers. Be spontaneous. Trust me, it's not hard. So here's the first question. The first question is, what are you drinking now? Now, the context of the question is, what's in your fridge with seasons changing? Are you shifting, from reds to whites? This is a tough question for you guys because whatever you're drinking now is probably what's going on the walls.
Yeah.
Is that it? I mean, is there time for personal? What are you drinking now? Andy, you go first.
We recently opened, and to be fair, it is going on this, but we recently opened a bottle of 18 Bourgogne Rouge from Ghislaine Barthold.
Okay.
And it was phenomenal. And I love holding back very entry-level wines from great producers.
Me too.
I think.
And it drank well. It held up
beautifully. I mean, it had much more life ahead of it.
7 years in the bottle.
And can do definitely with another 5 years.
Do you buy those and put them away so that 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now without spending a ton of money and all?
Yeah.
I used to buy Loire Bourguignon 7 years ago for like $77 a bottle. It's like $180 now. I stopped buying it, That and drinking wines for the wine bar. What about you?
Yes, similar. Lots of the the producers that we have represented here. I've lately been drinking a good amount more American wine than usual. Just simply like I'm a big fan of Finger Lakes for a long time, and so there's some really cool new releases out from producers I enjoy.
Give me some producers. I always love turning people on to. That's the point of this feature.
My favorite producer in the Finger Lakes, I think year to year, is a guy named Nathan Kindle. He makes the wine.
Nathan's
with
been on the
of
show,
course.
Chipika, and then his wine. Nathan
an
Kindle.
amazing person and incredible winemaker. So he has released, in 2022, he released a black label single vineyard Riesling from Toller Vineyard. He's doing a Cab Franc this year, a couple other things like that. So those kinds of things, retasting producers I love and re-drinking those are kind of what I do.
And the black label was on the list before.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't want to put you on the spot. It is on the list. So you jump in and say, you jump in and say, screw this guy. I had it on before him. And okay. So that's a good one.
Like that. And Kelby James Russell's another one. Him and
Up
Julia.
in the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not familiar. So
they have this
to me,
project,
it's discovered.
Apollo's Praise, that they started. Like the first release was last year, basically. And he and his partner, they both took over basically a beautiful vineyard site that they're making the wine from. And so things like that. And then some of Alice Anderson's wine from out in California, the Amviv project.
Oh, yeah.
But then also, just like a bit of everything, as much as really possible that I can get my hands on a taste. We've been tasting more Chinese wine, which I'm really excited about, but also like Japanese wine is something that I've been trying to taste more too. It's just kind of as many interesting areas as possible, while also continuing to expand current tasting of regions that are important.
All right, so those are good. I didn't mention I post the answers. We do a series of we want to get people to listen to the podcast. I invite people on that I think have great stories. So we want to promote people to listen to that. And then we want to remind people that the experts are giving us things. And I think I mentioned, and Annie, you be the arbiter of this, not to dwell on stuff. And it seemed like Matt was dwelling a little, but that's just a tip off. All right. Just kidding. Favorite wine and food pairing. Goofiest question on the list, but not what we think is the great wine and food pairing, and not something you eat or make often, but what is your wine and food pairing? Is it a childhood thing? Is it a thing you discovered as an adult in the restaurants? What's that ooh-ah pairing? For
me, it's grilled fish with tapenade and Cab Franc, which I know is really highly specific and bizarre.
Well, no, let's break that down. It's a red wine with fish, but everyone forgets you pair wine to the sauces. Tapenade is a very rich.
And the cooking preparation. So it's grilled fish with tapenade and Cab Franc.
Any kind of, decent Mediterranean white fish and all. Grilled fish with tapenade and Cab Franc. Why does Cab Franc work and not the other 4 Bordeaux blending wines?
I think it has the acidity that you want. And I find with Cab Franc, it has the olivey note that I love so much.
Yes.
And it complements the smokiness from the grill. It's just like an all-around killer pairing, especially for the summertime.
Annie, no one's ever given us that one. So that's a good one.
Perfect.
I love tapenade. I love Cab Franc. All right, Matt, your...
Yeah. I'm going to give you something that a lot of people probably have given you, but
Pinot Noir and roasted chicken?
No. Okay, if you know me, you know that this is like a big...
No, but we have a Grape Nation rule. You're not allowed to say champagne and oysters. But please continue. Okay, go ahead.
Vin Jaune and Comté.
Vin Jaune and Comté?
Comté is one of my favorite things in the world. Vin Jaune is one of my favorite things in the world. They go together amazingly. I have that every year on my birthday. If I can have it more, I have it more. It's a classic pairing.
I love that answer.
Loves.
Daniel Eddy introduced me to Comté that I didn't know enough about when he was at, I think, Pearl and Ash. And I fell in love with that cheese. And Vin Jaune, as we all said, we grew to like certain wines. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what is this? It's terrific. But I got to tell you something. I did a podcast about 3 weeks ago with David McMillan and Zev Rovine and Stephanie for their new book, Spilled.
Mm-hmm.
Zev answered Vin Jaune and Comté.
Yeah,
I don't think that's ever happened on this show.
within
like the Pinot Noir and roast chicken, Zuni chicken and so on and so. But
see, to me, I feel like
no, they're great. It's just
Vin Jaune Comté is almost like that level of it is a go-to pairing, but I just love it.
That's a great one. All right. So the question is your favorite wine bar and or restaurant. Okay. Now, let me help you with this. I'm not asking you to rank anything. I'm not asking you to give me a complete list. I will lead you in a way and say that King checks the box. Great wine, great attention to wine, great food. It's a restaurant, you know. Then there's wine. Pascaline does it, you know, at Chambers. And you have 2 kids, you're opening a new place, you're not running around all the time. But who's doing it well out there? Who are you comfortable saying, you know, that if somebody heard this and went to Chambers, they said, wow, Annie was right about that. What comes to your mind?
I have 2. One is Popina.
Okay,
James
our friend
is amazing. He's a dear, dear friend. It's the first place we celebrated. I mean, it's where we hung out during COVID when
I remember.
back
Billy
in,
Durney,
yep,
you were there,
and that's
James.
when I started dating my husband. And his list is always great.
Oh, he must have loved hanging with you and those guys, Sean.
Oh,
right?
yeah. They're like Sean and James are BFFs now. And the second is Eli's Table, which is our local. We're very lucky to have it under our apartment. And Thibaut Dubray, who is the wine director there, is absolutely incredible. The perfect blend of knowledge, hospitality, grace. He's awesome.
So I had Eli on the show, one of the most interesting guys.
Oh, yeah. He's great.
He's in his 80s. He still flies a jet
Yeah.
to Burgundy with a posse to taste wine.
Yeah.
I'm sure Thibaut's been with him a bunch of times. Those are 2 great ones. And one of the other things is Eli told me he likes to dry age his own steaks. So he brings me into this room of like 8 million dry aged steaks. And then he brings me into the basement and there's just
The
like,
cellars are crazy.
there's like a wet box of Romaine
Walls of every wine.
I go, you drink any of that? He goes,
So-
no, I leave that for the customers.
Yeah.
All right, you.
Norita.
So Jin was on the
Jin's-
show not long
Jin's
ago.
the dude.
I love Jin.
Everything about the place is
You gotta
excellent.
love Riesling, though.
It's a center for wine sharing in New York, which
It's
I
a
think is
community.
extremely important. Like wine is for sharing, and he really, really embodies that. So it's that place is both awesome and important. I think.
I like that. You have another one, or
I mean,
don't struggle.
you
if
know, like Popina is one that I enjoy that I
Okay.
don't get to as much just because of the area. I mean, the problem is there's a lot like Chambers is one I'd go to, but you already mentioned
Yeah.
that.
It's
Actually, what Hugo's doing at Roscioli is, I really, really love the list.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things on that list that people aren't
That-
looking
it's
at
in
'cause
good
it's
hands,
not necessarily Italian. There's stuff outside of that is really wonderful
Right.
at the moment too.
It's funny when I first interviewed James, I said, how the hell do 2 Irish guys open one of the most beloved Italian restaurants in the area? You know, he goes, well, you know, making hot chicken with, you know, we put our own slant on it. But to this day, he's still doing that well. All right. Again, like I said, I post that. All right. 4th question. Favorite all-time wine? Listen. The initial question was, what's the most expensive rare wine you ever had? All right. I asked Aldo Sohm that, and he started yelling at me. He goes, who cares about that?
Yeah.
He goes, you want to know the most interesting wine I ever drank? The most important wine? I'm like, you're right. I don't care. You know, everybody gets exposed to a 45 Romani or whatever. What is the wine to you all time that is important, that changed the way you thought about it, that you still think about? Is there one or 2 out there?
Yeah, they're both 08s. The first is Stella di
Why 08?
Compalto. Not on purpose. It just happened to be the vintage.
Okay.
Stella di Compalto Brunello 08. Life-changing wine for me.
Was it one of the vineyards like Bosco or Poderi or whatever?
No, it was those
Just
were just the Brunello.
And what was it about that?
I think I just didn't realize that Brunello could taste like that, with so much soul and so much complexity, and the floral and the aromatics on that wine. I can
Does the
still
word
remember.
restraint play in there at all, or you don't think of it?
I think it's really elegant.
Elegant, feminine, elegant.
And just the full package in terms of aromatic, texture, flavor. All of it was the complete package. I think the second bottle was 08 Ursules from Bouchard, which we drank on our wedding day.
Wait, I need help on this. Spell Ursules.
Ursules.
And Bouchard is the maker?
Cedric Bouchard.
Cedric Bouchard.
Yeah.
And what is the Ursules? Is that like Marcinay or Sandy? That's an
it's
area or
it's
region?
a vineyard. It's a vineyard
Okay.
site. He makes single variety, single vintage, single vineyard wines in Champagne and Celsius. And he's a winemaker that I think really connected me and Sean, and we've had the privilege of visiting him twice, and we collect a lot of his wines now because of the personal connection and
That's a good one.
how much we love it.
That's what I'm looking for by asking these questions. Matt?
Me, it's difficult. There's so many of those wines that I really want to plug. But
But was there something early on in Florida
Yeah.
or something that when you hit the ground here, like somebody that you admired said, hey,
Florida,
can't taste this?
for sure, Domaine de Collier for me, the
Okay.
Charpentry Blanc. Probably, if I had to do it, there's some right up there. There's some over there.
Right.
That is an absolute.
So that hit with you.
Yeah,
and
I
to this
tasted
day,
it very early.
You
and
remember then, and it's important
Yeah,
now.
I think
That's
I
it.
had a slew of vintages from a friend of mine down there. I opened a couple, and then after that, it was all over with. And that's a wine that I've just had
That's
in
a
my
good one.
life as much as possible for as long as I can.
That's a good one. All right, last question. You guys should be able to handle this.
I don't know.
Not as good as some other people, but I want you to recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks retail. And I want you to recommend a white or I want you to recommend and a red.
Okay.
Now, on white, you can go like category. You could say, well, Muscadet,
Yeah.
great value. You want to spend a buck or two more, get a Clisson, blah, blah, blah. But then people wind up saying, Pepier, whatever. Give me a winemaker or a region or a category that's great value in that price range.
I think especially as we head into summer, I love Vermentino. And I love
My
Vermentino
fave.
from Liguria. I think Punta Crena is an amazing producer.
Punta.
Punta Crena,
C-R-
PNTA space CRENA. They make a Vermentino, a Pigato Matawasu, similar price point. Fantastic, salty, fresh, summer wine.
Do Ligurian Vermentinos differ a little from when you go down the coast, I guess, to the Bulgari coast?
Yeah, I think they're a little bit fresher.
Up in Liguria.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, so that's a good one. And you could probably get that for 20, 22 bucks or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a white. Reds tend to be harder. Can you think of a red?
It's on our by the glass list. It's slightly cheating, but I think this is general. I think dolcettos from great producers are really underrated.
I agree.
And I think they are fantastic food wines. And I think you can have a glass on its own. You can have it with your meal. And they're so versatile. The one we have on our list is by a newish producer named Mauro Marengo. But it just reminded me that, great Barolo producers often make killer dolcettos. And they're kind of underappreciated.
I was just going to say that. You could go baller on the Dolcetto and, get a really famous guy, spend a little more. There are good producers making great value. So that's a great one. You handle that with incredible ease, Annie, which is kind of how you flow through life. Okay.
Definitely.
Matt, give me a white and a red. You can give me multiples in any of those.
White, I'm going to go back to what we talked about before, and I think whites from the Finger Lakes right now are
Okay.
incredibly great value.
Love to
drinking
promote
really
that, and
lovely.
they are there.
Yeah, and
Give
they're
me
there.
a producer or two.
Well, I mentioned Nathan before. He's a go-to.
Okay.
For sure. There's a variety of options. I think almost anything you want to drink up there. You
But
can have
take a look at the
excellent
Finger
Chardonnay
Lakes.
and Riesling, kind of whatever you please. There's people making Blanc de Noir up there, which is interesting as well.
Give me a red.
Red, I'll go more like grape category, Grenache. I think there's a lot of really excellent Grenache
From
at very reasonably
all over the world.
Gredos, California. We're
Right.
pouring a wine from Sacramento Valley, basically,
Who?
on Sand
Which one?
Infield Wine Company, the stained glass
Yeah.
Grenache. It's his blend.
Sure.
That or like the Comendo Hay, it's sitting a little higher now at the price point retail. They're under 30 still. The
Wait,
La
I've been
Bruja.
calling it Commando G forever,
Commando
and
G,
it's
but,
hay. What is it?
I didn't know that because I don't speak
Annie, what
Spanish.
is it? What do you think it was?
Commando G.
Oh, okay.
I
good.
wouldn't base
All right.
how to pronounce it
So
off
you
of
lose
my
too.
pronunciation of that. I also
No,
don't
you're
speak,
not. You're
I also
not.
don't speak
You're
speak
trying
Spanish.
to kiss up to Daniel Landy's ass. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, those
those are good. Grenache, I think,
Yeah.
categorically, and then
Yeah, I think there's
there are some good people
producers.
there, and it's made all over the world. All right, more than an admirable job, you guys.
Thank you.
And the reason for this is really discovery. I give our listeners an opportunity to hear from the experts stuff that they never, heard about. And you guys toil over this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. All right, we're almost out of here. We end the show with a feature called the Weekly Wine Sip. I have a lot of winemakers on the show. So why wouldn't I sit with a winemaker and say, let's taste and talk about your wine? I kind of translate that to you guys and say, I said, Annie, pick a wine out that's kind of representative of what you're trying to do here. The type of producer, the type of varietal, price point, availability. So tell me about the wine you selected.
So this is a Chardonnay from Nevitz. I did not know that that's how you pronounced it.
So Nevitz, I'm holding the bottle, is Nevitz.
Yeah.
Oh, no, KN. Is that a K?
KN.
Yeah.
I thought it was Knevitz. It's very wrong.
Knevitz is good with knishes.
And I first had this wine actually at Eli's table, and then the winemaker was in town, and Matt tasted it with Katya, who used to be the wine director at Colomon.
Right. Who's
And-
with Skurnik now.
Yeah, and who has been doing, showing incredible German
Should
and
be so
Austrian
excited you
producers.
picked one of our wines.
Yeah, it's absolutely delicious.
It is delicious.
So
And
this-
Tobias, the winemaker, is
This is
lovely.
an example of German Chardonnay,
Yep.
Yeah.
which is the game's been upped in Germany with Chardonnay. So you were talking about Tobias is the winemaker
Yeah.
at Knevitz?
Yeah, he's the winemaker. The winery's been around a little while, but in terms of like its current version of what they're making, focusing on its, I think kind of his parents started in more like the 70s. He took over in the mid 2000s, basically. They have a decent amount of land, but all the wine is like a lot of Riesling isolated from single like vineyard sites, essentially. And then this Chardonnay also grows in a number of those really excellent sites that they take.
So thoughtful farming,
Yeah.
organics, by whatever,
thoughtful
sustainable,
winemaking
everything.
on top of it, yeah.
Fits the profile
Right.
of what you'd like on the shelf. A little unique. Not a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? This is a perfect.
I think it's also Chardonnay's a grape that a lot of people love and are familiar with, but with Burgundy in California, that price point is very hard for a lot of people. So trying to find Chardonnay that people will love at a price point that people will love is where we ended up with this.
So a few things about this. Let's do an evaluation. So the color is kind of a typical Chardonnay, not too light, not too dark, right?
Yep.
I suck at this. You guys are supposed experts. Tell me what you get on the nose. I could tell you one thing. It hit me like a truck. That petrol, a little reduction in Riesling.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect that in a Chardonnay. Am I right about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
So what else is on the nose?
I think that reduction is like really beguiling. I mean, some people hate it, but we love it.
Yeah.
Totally interesting.
It's really
Now-
big lift.
I've said this 10 times on the show that I've asked this question a million times. I've asked this question a million times. That's reduction, not oxidation, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get that right away. So on the nose, you get any, what'd you say? Did you have any descriptors?
Oh, I think you definitely get citrus. You get like that really fresh lemony scent. I think it's really lovely that it carries through on the palate where you get that kind of like burst of acidity. Chardonnay
So
can
the
be,
descriptors on the nose carry through the palate.
Yeah.
While we're on the palate, are there new things on the palate that are not on the nose?
I get a lot of green apple.
You do?
Yeah.
It's a bit more like
I
green apple skin.
So-
More, a little bit like the Maliki thing versus
Right.
black thing. Like
Um,
lemon curd and white floral.
Yeah.
It's a reductive wine, which is why you would recommend it or drink it. I can't get by in a good way that petrol-y thing. I mean, I just don't expect that.
Yeah. I think we did. That is the first glass, and when we opened it, it kind of
It evens out a
it
little.
evens out.
Yeah,
with a
as
little bit of
other
time.
wines that are even, older,
It's a
whatever.
wine that tastes great on day 5. Like, that's tastes
really
great
is
the
wonderful.
whole range.
And the mouthfeel is kind
Yeah.
of this medium.
Yeah.
It's not unctuous.
Yeah, there's
it's
oak,
not
but
thin.
it's not. It's very well done, integrated, and pretty minimal in terms of how much they're using year to year. It's all barrique, and yeah, I think it's really
Really good.
lovely texture. Has great acid. Like that's something I think that's very, very important. Both of us is acid. Is
Do you
big thing
guys
about.
know if this is in, like, let's start with New York because it's easier. If it's in wine shops or it's kind of small production, hard to get. Not sure.
I would imagine that it's available in.
You know what?
In wine
Offline, I'll
shops.
ask Katya.
Yeah, just ask
I would
Scott.
say
Then
there's-
when,
She'll know.
when I do the wine list,
It
Yeah.
may not
I'll
be
say-
like directly available right now in New York City. Other
Well,
than
no,
a couple
it's
people.
either a wine that one way or another will be around, or it's one of those that you'll
I feel
never
like
see.
Astor
around.
or Flatiron. Or
Yeah.
Leon
Yeah, that's what I'm
Side
saying.
will
Those
have it.
places.
Places that
They
would
go
have
through
their
the pages.
Riesling would probably also bring in maybe some
So-
Chardonnay, possibly.
Two questions. What foods would you pair this with? What foods would you pair this with at Lay?
At Lay, we
Start
have-
with general.
Oh,
What's a? I'll do Matt on. What's a general good pairing with this?
I mean, most things I feel like this would drink really nicely with.
Pretty
just 'cause
versatile.
Yeah, it's very, very versatile. I think that's kind
It
of
could
like our
handle some
goal with
heavier
it.
stuff, and it could
Yeah.
handle the classical stuff
Right, you could-
because of the reduction.
Right?
It's
Like
big.
if you want to drink this with like a, more French leaning cuisine, you can. It doesn't have to be like German leaning cuisine. You can drink it with certain Italian cuisines, things like that. When you think
it'd be
like,
great with like cacio e pepe.
I was literally about to say like a pasta. Like
the
a
richness
cheese
and
or like
body
a
of that.
white-
This
yeah.
would. What about it at Lay?
So
What's
we
coming on the menu
have-
that this is a nice pairing?
Yeah, I was actually thinking like we have this like Dolly inspired goat's cheese that we pan fry.
Like a
and-
halloumi?
Yeah, it kind of has like halloumi vibes, and we serve it with this homemade toasted 5-spice powder, and I feel like it would be so good with that.
Is the cheese like complex or mild or middle?
I would say it's middle. You
So
definitely
you need a
taste-
little body
Yeah,
to.
you can taste the goat's milk a little bit, but
Nice.
it's delicate.
That's kind of an unusual menu entree for
Super
Chinese.
traditional. It's from
There,
Yes,
Nice,
there
yeah.
from Yunnan, from
Yeah.
from the region, but not here. But it's inspired because that cheese actually isn't imported, so we found our best.
so the
alternative.
2022. What? How do we pronounce it again?
Nevitz.
Nevitz
I think.
Chardonnay
Could be Nevitz as
from. It's a Trocken from the Rhine-Hessen
Yep.
region. Very nice pick, guys. All right, I got to do a quick wrap up, and I know you're chomping to get going. And I need to get info from you guys. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Listen to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to the Grape Nation. If you really like it, leave a positive review. Follow us on Instagram at SBenRuby, on X at BenRuby, 2 different handles, but you can reach us on both with hashtag The Grape Nation. We're on Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we will post Annie and Matt's wine list, so you get a double shot on that. You get Annie's answers and Matt's answers, and I will give you all the info on our weekly wine sip, which we all agree is representative of what's going on here. Interesting, producer. All right, so Annie, where can we find more info on Lay if people? Is there a website?
There's a website. There's very little on the website now, but there will
Are
be
you
more.
going to upload like wine lists at
Yeah.
time, or keep that general
Yeah.
menu,
Well,
hours?
Exactly.
Okay.
That'll all exist. And we offer a couple tables on Resi, but we hold most of our spots for walk-ins.
Walk-ins?
So we encourage people to just stop by.
Okay. You're open when? How many days a week?
Wednesday to Sunday, 5 to 10:30.
Okay. It sounds like it works for your life.
Wednesday to Sunday? Definitely
well,
not.
yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, well, you have Monday.
If I
and
had my
Tuesday.
way, it
Maybe
would
the
be
hours.
Monday to Friday, but
Well, yeah, that's normal. But you have Monday to go out and shop and buy paper towels and whatever. What about King and Jupiter? Same thing?
King is open 7 days a week for dinner and then open Friday to Sunday for lunch. And we actually just launched a breakfast pop-up for the summer. So if
Oh,
you're in the
nice.
neighborhood and you want a coffee and a pastry, we
Oh,
have
that's
Cafe King
smart.
in the morning, which is really lovely. And then Jupiter is 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. So you can
Okay.
find us anytime
Busy spot.
for the summer.
So all of those guys are on social media, right?
Yeah.
Lay has its own Instagram
Yeah.
account, Jupiter King. What's Lay's account?
At lay.wine.
Okay, LEI.wine. Jupiter at Jupiter, New York City.
.net, New York, yeah.
New York and King.
.New York.
And people,
Yeah.
if people want to follow Annie, I think it's like Annie
Dot H dot
underscore.
she. Yeah.
Whatever. All right. Just put in Annie Sheen and
Okay.
pop up. All right, Matt,
Mm.
if we want to find you, do you spend any time on social media?
I have Instagram.
Okay.
There's not a lot going on necessarily, but it is there. My whatever my tag, whatever you call it, is sardonic _maceration.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Is it?
Yeah.
Matt doesn't have an Amazon account, so you
Yeah.
You don't have a Prime account?
No, I don't personally.
All right. He'll grow, Annie. He'll grow up one day.
can.
All right.
Low key.
All right, so you could find more info on all these places, and if you want to follow these guys, we gave you the handles. I'll be posting in the next week, like I said, with all the wine list and weekly wine sip picks and all that. All right, guys, I want to thank our guest, Annie Shih. Annie, thank you, and really one of the busiest times in your life to agree to sit with me. A lot of exciting stuff, and we wish you good luck. Matt, Annie reached out and said, do you mind if Matt sits with us? That's the way she thinks, and I love that because you're an integral part of this. So thank you. I wish both of you good luck. And Annie, don't forget what we talked about at the beginning. Work-life balance. Do this well.
Thank you.
But everything else is, just as important. It seems like you figured it out. Thanks to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
I know. You're constantly making choices about your food, what you eat, what you avoid, where you get it, and how you factor in all the noise about what's right. But I think you're missing something really critical about how the food on your plate is deeply connected to everything you care about: your health, the community, the environment, and the economy. I'm Dana DePrima, founder of the Four Farmers Movement and host of the One Bite is Everything podcast, now proudly a part of Heritage Radio Network. Here we are reconnecting the dots, revealing the hidden forces behind our food system and why it matters more than ever. Each week, we uncover the real impact of what's on your plate, who controls it, what's at stake, and what you can do about it. Because food is more than just what you eat. It's quite literally connected to everything you care about. New episodes drop every Thursday. Subscribe to One Bite is Everything and take your seat at the table.